We've already seen one big part of this core move positions in the field. Could we see another in Bryan Reynolds?
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. Welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of the Locked On Pirates podcast, bringing you your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates, from a lifelong fan to lifelong fans just like you. Today's episode is brought to you by the people over at FanDuel. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com right now for all of your sports betting needs, because there are a ton of sports to be betting on. Baseball, football, college football. You can bet on all that stuff over at FanDuel.com. And, of course, welcome back to my everydayers. Love you. Love yins so much. Thank you always for tuning into the show. Whenever it comes out, this one will be dropping around 5 to 5:30. Busy afternoon for me. And a busy afternoon really for the Pittsburgh Pirates every single day as the 2024 season is coming to a close. You start to think about things, and you start to see stuff circulate through the news about potential changes that will be coming to the roster and, things that are going to be different in 2025. One of those appears to potentially be something that we've been potentially flirting with for a while. But the yesterday, Bryan Reynolds ended up becoming a topic of conversation because of a piece from Trib Live's Kevin Gorman that was pretty simply titled, "Could All-Star Outfielder Bryan Reynolds be the next prominent Pirate to switch positions?" And if you haven't had a chance to read it, please do. It's a phenomenal piece that Kevin wrote. Lots of very good info in that piece about this potential move to first base for Bryan Reynolds going into next season. Now, I don't think this is something that you'll see over the next 2 weeks with the season coming to a close. I just don't truthfully see it happening. I don't think it's anything that you really have to worry about seeing right now. But let's not rule it out. Let's not rule it out as a potential thing that the Pirates could do. I mean, we've already seen them move O'Neal Cruz from shortstop to center field. There's been some growing pains there, but I've liked overall what I've seen so far from O'Neal Cruz at the center field position. I think his athleticism, as well as his speed and just what he's able to do out there, is going to help him a ton. And with this piece on Bryan Reynolds that Kevin Gorman wrote, it is interesting because Reynolds himself did not roll it out. Derek Shelton, who knows if he'll be here even anyway next year, didn't roll it out. So you start to ponder the idea that Bryan Reynolds could potentially move to that first base position, a position that's been in flux for a very long time in Pittsburgh. Really even dating back to, I couldn't even really tell you, because you've seen Rowdy Tellez and Yoshi Tsutsugo and G-Man Choi, Carlos Santana, Rowdy Tellez, Josh Bell. We've seen a lot of players go through this first base position over the years. So it would be nice to solidify the position with a guy like Bryan Reynolds, because I think Reynolds could probably do it. I mean, if he worked on it through the entire offseason, excuse me, I see no reason why he couldn't do it. And I think it's something that would obviously, much like O'Neal Cruz did with his move to center field, just kind of solidify the future at a position of need. And that's exactly what the move to center field has done for the Pirates with O'Neal Cruz. He's going to stick out there for the foreseeable future. He's going to be a part of that outfield for a while. And it's thus created, a hole somewhere else. And that's what would happen here with Bryan Reynolds potentially moving to first base, is if you see Reynolds move to first base, then you start having to ask yourself some questions about what the Pirates do as far as the corner outfield spots are concerned. Because currently your outfield is Bryan Reynolds, O'Neal Cruz, and right now Billy Cook. But you're obviously going to see guys like potentially Brian De La Cruz, who could be a non-tender candidate this offseason with the way he's played since arriving from Miami. And you still have Jack Sawinski, who obviously had his struggles this season as well. So you start to have a lot of question marks in the corner outfield. You already have them in right field. But moving moving Bryan Reynolds to left, or from left field to first base, would thus create those same exact questions again. And I think it's interesting because he said to Kevin Gorman, I highly doubt that. I'm just trying to increase some general athleticism, help me all the way around the field. It's fun, a little change of pace. What do we got? 2 weeks left. That would be something. And Reynolds also said, I mean, maybe. Obviously, Reynolds leading the team with a 282 average, 348 on base, 22 home runs, 85 RBIs, and an 805 OPS. And he says that we haven't really had any conversation so much about it, but if it's going to help me be a better athlete in the batter's box or in the outfield, then there's no harm in having a little fun with it. So basically where this all stemmed from is Bryan Reynolds was in left field on the warning track, kind of just taking ground balls with an infield glove with Don Kelly and Mendy Lopez. And he was just taking ground balls while on his knees. And it's interesting. And you also look at what Derek Shelton had to say about this. If we did ever consider it, it would be one of those things, and that's why we're doing it now, to have Donnie and Mendy able to watch him. So it's not just he calls from Nashville and says, hey, I think I could play first. No, that's not how that works. But you also look at some other examples of this working out for a player, and I think it's very hard to ignore what Bryce Harper has done since moving from the outfield to first base. He has been one of the better players in baseball, even when he was in the outfield, but you've seen him kind of take an extra step forward offensively since he moved to first base, seeing as I don't think you have as much to worry about at first base as you would in the outfield. Now, obviously, you're catching the ball on any ball in play in the infield 9 times out of 10, but that's a position that also does not tax you as much. You're not asked to do as much as far as athleticism is concerned. And for a guy in Bryan Reynolds, he has the frame to play the position. It's a position that I think would suit him well. It's just more, do you want to move him to first base and then thus have to deal with not only having to fill one corner outfield spot, but 2, which I did write a story on Steel City Pirates about some early free agent targets that could fix that problem. And you don't really know. I mean, maybe this is just something that Reynolds is doing that, as he said, maybe he just wants to move his skill set around and, make things work as far as being a better defensive player. He's not a horrible defensive player, but by no means is Bryan Reynolds a guy that you look at and say that is a Gold Glove winner. You don't say that when you're looking at a guy in Bryan Reynolds, but you could also consider again at the end of the day that you say, okay, well, maybe let's try him out at first base, see how it works. And maybe it ends up solidifying a position of need that also you're not going to have a lot of options out in free agency to fill that position either. So maybe it's something to ponder. There's a domino effect to this move, just like there was with O'Neal Cruz's center field, if it does happen. And if it does indeed happen, it could work out for Bryan Reynolds. It could work out for the team in general. It's just something that we would have to see in practice first just to really get a gauge on it. But I thought that it was an interesting thing to talk about on the show today. The Pirates did lose to the St. Louis Cardinals last night, and, well, they're eliminated from playoff contention. We're going to go look back at that game and talk about why things are really frustrating right now for the Pittsburgh Pirates, especially being eliminated from playoff contention, next on the Locked On Pirates podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. And right now, one Caleb Williams passing yard gets you one win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. Folks, that's 4 weeks of free wins. So don't miss this deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in most states, including California, Texas, and Georgia. And Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks, your picks are still alive. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. And don't forget to check out Locked On MLB after you watch this show, because Paul Francis Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is getting you ready for the Fall Classic, and it's right around the corner. So make sure you go show some love to Locked On MLB and Paul Francis Sullivan today on the Locked On Podcast Network. To my everydayers, thank you so much for tuning into the show, as you always do every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I am very appreciative of all of you. Also, thank you for 2,100 subscribers on YouTube. We are very appreciative of that as well. And the Pittsburgh Pirates are now 71-79 after losing their opening game of a 4-game set against the St. Louis Cardinals last night, 4-0. We're going to talk about Paul Skenes being magical again in the final part of today's show. But obviously the bullpen, kind of the story in this one, gives up 3 runs in the 7th and 8th inning that just effectively took the Pirates out of the game. The offense especially just really struggled. I mean, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, 2 for 4 on the evening, has been a pretty solid addition to this team from the trade deadline. But you also look at Brian De La Cruz, who was 1 for 4, and the only other hit on the evening came from a Jared Triolo single. That was it. I mean, that's really it. And that's just not something you really want to see from this team right now. You kind of want to see them have some fight. It's kind of hard to, seeing as they are now eliminated from playoff contention and kind of just playing out the stretch. But it sucks. I mean, you had 4 runners left in scoring position. That's the difference right there in this game. 5 left on base. Nick York, by the way, debuted yesterday, did get on base, or did not get on base, sorry. Or was on base and had a stolen base. I'm so sorry. I'm like trying to figure out how I wanted to word it. Had a strikeout. 12 strikeouts on the evening for the Pirates, though. The Cardinals side of things, obviously, it was a big night from Nolan Arenado. Brendan Donovan had a big night. Pedro Pajes had a very good evening as well. So being eliminated from playoff contention was something we already knew was going to happen at this point, especially after the stretch that they had in August, just how far behind they were and not really being able to climb out of this hole that they put themselves in. And it is unfortunate. I mean, it really is. It's a spot that you didn't want to see the Pirates put themselves in, especially when they bought at the trade deadline, bringing in IKF, bringing in Nick York, Billy Cook. You see Brian De La Cruz, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, Jalen Beeks. A lot of these guys come in, and it was a team that was just 2.5 games back at the trade deadline of a wild card spot. And the wheels just fell off. You've heard me say that on this show plenty of times. The wheels just fell off for this team. And it's unfortunate because we were really looking to see the Pirates take that next step this year. It appeared that it was going to be a year where they were going to take that next step and be in it relatively until the end. I mean, to be in it 2 weeks before the season ends could be viewed as being in it till the end. But you're looking at the Cardinals at 75-75, a mere 4 games, making the difference as far as being eliminated from playoff contention. And I think being frustrated about all of this makes a lot of sense. It really does. I mean, you are very warranted frustrated right now because this is a team that, again, was right there. It was a team that was showing us that they could beat the best of the best in this league in the LA Dodgers, that they could compete in this division with teams like Milwaukee, St. Louis, Cincinnati, and Chicago. They could win games against those other teams. And then the NL West came along, and for some reason, they just could not figure things out against the NL West. Now, I've said it plenty of times. If they would have won 3 games in that stretch, they would be 2 games under 500 right now. 4 games, they'd be right at 500. They'd be right where the St. Louis Cardinals are. And I think that the feeling around the team would be a lot better if the Pirates were in that spot, flirting with finishing over 500, flirting with having a better record than they did last season. But they're not. I mean, there's a real shot that the Pittsburgh Pirates do not finish with a better record this year. And if you listen to any of my shows last week, I talked about that, about is record an indication of growth? Well, it can also be an indication of stagnation. And you're asking the Pirates to have more than 5 wins with their remaining games, 3 more against St. Louis, 3 against Cincinnati, 3 against Milwaukee, and 3 against the Yankees. So if they can go 500 over those games, they would improve, folks, by 1 game. They would be 77-85. That's not a spot you want to be in. I mean, you looked at that team in the Kansas City Royals, that they played over the weekend, and that's a team that was a 100-loss team last year. Now, are they playing a little bit earlier than people expected? Potentially. But they're still going to be a playoff team. They're still getting back to the postseason for the first time since 2015. Something the Pirates have been trying to do and figure out since that time. And to say 500 baseball would improve you by 1 game from last season is as frustrating as it gets. Because, I mean, as I mentioned, again, if you won 3 games in that stretch of 10 games that you lost in a row, you go 500, you're an 80-win team. And that's the nature of baseball. It just is. I mean, you go back and look at the A's series or the Angels series or the 10-game losing streak or those 3rd game of a series lineups that we're cringing at. That's the difference in where this team is right now. And that's going to continue to be the difference in where this team is until they find a way not to. Is that improving the team in free agency? Is that improving the team via trade? Is that moving your all-star outfielder to first base? Don't really know. But what we do know is that the Pirates are eliminated from playoff contention. They already were. But the thing is, it's more frustrating to hear it this time around, especially in my 4th season covering this team on this show, because there was a real thought that they could get there this year or at least be in it to the bitter end. And they're not. And it is frustrating to see them be such a stagnant team. Like we saw that big jump from 2022 to 2023. We were expecting to see some kind of jump this season. We just haven't seen it. So why are things frustrating? Why? That's why. Because it felt like they were right there, and then it just got yanked out of the way. So yeah, no Pirates baseball in October this year. And it sucks. But we still have Paul Skenes, who was magical once again yesterday against the St. Louis Cardinals, but he had to do it a little bit differently this time around. we're going to discuss on the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com right now because you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com right now to download America's #1 sportsbook. You can still bet on the Pittsburgh Pirates. You can bet on the Pittsburgh Steelers. You can bet on the NFL, Major League Baseball, anything you want, because FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook and an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. And welcome, everybody, to the final part of today's episode of Locked On Pirates, featuring the newly bought terrible towel. Lost mine, so I had to get another one. So I figured it'd be a nice little addition to the back right here. Favorite thing that you guys have seen about the background this year? I would love to know. I don't have the bobbleheads on me right now. They're still in Georgia. But I would love to know what the favorite part of your background is of the show. Is it the flag or the IC light schedule, the baby Yoda, maybe the Georgia tumbler for my people in Georgia that listen to the show still? We still have some bobbleheads. We got David Bednar, Andrew McCutcheon up there. What we need is a Paul Skenes bobblehead, because Paul Skenes, folks, he was magical again yesterday, and it was in another losing effort as far as the team is concerned. Loss for him as well. 10-3 on the year with a 2.07 ERA for Paul Skenes. What more is there to say? I mean, the guy has he's closing numbers, closer-like numbers as a starter. He's insane. His strikeouts per 9 is insane through his first 21 games. He's at 126 innings. He's nuts. 158 strikeouts from what you see. 7 of those coming last night. And the Cardinals are the only team that he's faced multiple times that he does not have a win against just yet. But what I liked about yesterday, specifically with Paul Skenes, was that you saw the pitch mix have to change yesterday. You saw that what he usually does to get the strikeouts and to get the elusive outs that he usually gets, he wasn't allowed to. Well, I wouldn't say he wasn't allowed to do it. He wasn't able to do it. So he had to kind of change things up. And he got deeper into his toolbox and found a way to still have a very solid outing. And using the changeup was a big part of that, where he actually struck out a right-handed batter for the first time using his changeup, a pitch that you don't see him use all that much because of the splinker and the fastball and the slider combination that he has. And Skenes did say to MLB.com, I had to do some things that I haven't done necessarily to this point in the season. They've seen everything. So then it turns into, playing the game of baseball. And we had a pretty good game plan and executed it pretty well. So that's what you like to see. And even Derek Shelton thought that was good to see from him as well. I thought the changeup was actually really good too. He was able to use it. He used it right on right some, but overall he threw the ball well. It was a 1-run game going into the 7th inning. And that's what Paul Skenes did for you. He got you to the 7th inning with a 1-run game. But sadly, you couldn't get the win. The offense didn't do much yesterday. And the bullpen just gave up some more runs. So be it. But as mentioned, the Cardinals are the only team that he's faced multiple times and has not earned a win in an outing. And the last 2 times, took his first career loss. Guess who was there? Me. Against the Cardinals. And had a no decision before that. But you look at what he's done. Just against St. Louis. A 1.30 ERA, 23 strikeouts to 1 walk, and 13 hits in 20 2/3 innings. Folks, he just matures with every start. He gets better with every single start. He's only going to keep getting better with every single start. And I mean, look, he even retired the first 10 guys of the game last night. And you guys have heard me talk about the Rookie of the Year stuff. I just genuinely don't know how you don't give it to him. He broke the Pirates' single-season strikeout record for rookies. He continues to mature with every start and look good in doing so. And his stats would be a lot better if some of those no decisions turned into wins and with some offensive support. But at the end of the day, when we talk about 2025, Paul Skenes is going to be the center of attention, and he really should be. And that's where I'll end today's show. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every single day. My name is Ethan Smith. Follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates, from a lifelong fan to lifelong fans just like you. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday evening. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, see you on the flip side.